all here tonight. For those of you who don't know me, I am on the faculty at the NRI. I've been asked to introduce the speakers tonight. Just so you know, I was handed talking points, so for the first time I can't be held responsible for anything that's on here. So tonight we're going to have... Okay.
Can they cut the music?
Suzanne, can you get them to cut the music off?
I just asked.
Okay.
Can I have a handheld if you want it.
Is he working?
No.
Can you hear me better now?
No.
Not working.
Hello? There we go. I just have to touch it.
You're magical. Okay. Try to keep it from doing that. So tonight we're going to have not one, but two very prominent professors talk to us about the Mediterranean diet. Dr. John Anderson is an adjunct professor at the Department of Nutrition at UNC Chapel Hill. He earned his Ph.D. in physical biology at Cornell. He's had a long research career in studying calcium and bone metabolism using not only humans but animals and cells. So his human studies were designed to examine the effects of nutritional factors on bone health in young adult women. One of his studies was seminal in showing that nearly all of the gain in bone mass happens in a female before the age of 18. His current work is looking at estrogen-like isoflavones from soy on cells that form new bones. So he's a member of the American Society of Nutritional Sciences, the American Society for Clinical Nutrition, the American Society for Bone and Mineral Research, and the International Bone and Mineral Society. He's also on the editorial boards of many journals and is past president of the American College of Nutrition. Dr. Nieman is a professor at the College of Health Sciences at Appalachian State, and he's the director of the Human Performance Lab here on campus. He got his Doctor of Public Health at Loma Linda University, and he was a pioneer in exercise immunology. So what he studies is how unique nutritional products are countermeasures to exercise and obesity-induced immune dysfunction, inflammation, illness, and oxidative stress, and he uses metabolomics in his research. He has had $8.7 million in research grants. He's written over 330 peer-reviewed papers and chapters, 9 books, and sits on 10 editorial boards for journals. He is Vice President of the American College of Sports Medicine, he has served as president of the Southeast chapter of the American College of Sports Medicine, and he's done 2 terms as president of the International Society of Exercise and Immunology. Here's a fun fact. I did not know this about David. He is an acrobatic gymnast and coach for 10 years, and he's run 58 marathons and ultramarathons. So would you join me in welcoming Drs. Nieman and Anderson?
Thank you very much, Dr. Cheatham. I'm very pleased to be able to speak along with David. David and I put a paper out about a year ago on this aspect of the diet, the Mediterranean diet, and we came together on this, and this whole area is growing so fast. Benefits of the Mediterranean diet in terms of health. And I did a book with a dietitian from Chapel Hill a few years ago. And in this book, we've covered a lot of the diseases that are, thank you, is that better? A lot of the diseases that are affected by having, beneficially affected by having a diet such as the Mediterranean diet. It's a rather complicated topic, actually. So I'm going to step over the side a little bit and talk from this point. and go beyond. So what is a Mediterranean diet? Well, it's really a lot of different kinds of diets because there are many Mediterranean countries, and they aren't all like the Greek or Italian or French or Spanish diets that most of us think of as Mediterranean, but also Middle Eastern and North African. So there are a lot of variations of the diet. Almost any of the Mediterranean diets, though, tend to be rich in various plant foods. And I think that's one of the keys that I hope I can leave with you this evening, that plant foods, vegetables, fruits, nuts, seeds, and any other variants of plant foods are so important to health. And they contain not just nutrients, but they also contain materials that we call sometimes non-nutrients. Most of them are polyphenols. They're chemical molecules made by the plants that have photosynthesis because they are able to have a lot of energy that can generate many different kinds of molecules. And so when we eat plant foods that are not processed much or very minimally processed, we get the benefit of all of those plant foods. So the kinds of foods we're talking about are really foods that are grown locally, or in case of some of the seafoods, which are obtained from local water sources in the world. And you can translate the Mediterranean diet that to almost any place in the world now because of the availability of lots of fresh fruits and vegetables and seafoods. The problem is that they're a little bit more expensive than most other foods. So that's a terrible, unfortunate factor in life. But one of the last points I'd like to make here is about the no concerns about high fat intakes, high salt, or junk foods. And the junk foods or the highly processed foods that we have so many of them are sweetened, have salt added to them, or possibly are high in fats, especially saturated fats. So it's not that all these things are bad. It's just that the amounts are bad. So when we have a normal diet, we don't always get all the benefits of the Mediterranean diet. And so I'm just saying, please think more about getting fruits and vegetables in the diets. And if your children don't like them, try to find ways that they can like them. Not easy. Okay, so what is a Mediterranean diet? I think this is pretty easy. You have a handout in front of you. I'll come to that a little bit, I think, later on. But in any event, it's fruits, numbers of servings. Pretty much every main meal should have some fruits and vegetables. Now that's a lot. Most people don't eat that way. I don't eat that way. I don't eat as many. But I always try to have some fruit, some vegetables. My wife is helpful in doing that for me. Low-fat milks are okay. Cheeses are okay, but not too much. Not so many servings. And then some of the other foods that are so popular are the richer foods like meats and eggs and so on. So it's okay to have some of all these foods, but not so much of the carbohydrates. It seems like the Mediterranean diet is not really a low-fat diet. It's sort of a moderate-fat diet. But with all the other components of the diet, and especially the kinds of fats in the Mediterranean diet, that they are beneficial for us, more so than in the typical kinds of foods that we aren't recommending here. So you don't see here a lot of processed foods. Big industry, big food industry has really taken over the world. Processed foods, junk foods are all over the world now, all the markets everywhere. So we're handing out, maybe in a way, bad diets to the rest of the world as well. So a good diet should be accompanied with a good, healthy lifestyle. And not everybody can participate in physical activities regularly, but just plain walking is very good for people. And having not only good diet, but also having plenty of water. If you can prepare your own meals, that's even better, especially if you use lots of fruits and vegetables. So adherence to the Mediterranean diet reduces the risks of many chronic diseases, and this is what we're learning more and more about. David will probably say a little bit more about that. We cover a lot of those in this book on the Mediterranean diet, actually. And this is what's been advanced in recent years. Huge knowledge about the benefits through many different kinds of human studies, mostly epidemiological in nature, but some of you may have heard of the Pretty Med study. It got a lot of publicity about 2 years ago from the New England Journal of Medicine, showing how beneficial that diet is for health, and included nuts. That was one of the issues in that, plus seafoods, fruits and vegetables. Plant foods, I can't overestimate them enough in terms of their benefits. Fat is not the major issue with a Mediterranean diet because so many of the fats that are involved with olive oil or with olives themselves are polyunsaturated or monounsaturated, and they tend to be beneficial. The polyunsaturates are known as the omega-3 fatty acids. You see that a lot in the advertisements, and they are certainly good for you. You don't get them from palm oils. Palm oils are almost all saturated fat, so you want to be a little bit careful and watch out for kinds of margarines that are not made from better vegetable oils. Fiber and polyphenols. Fiber and polyphenols. A lot of them come right through your system, go out, but they're still good for you. It keeps you healthy. So remember that fiber has a lot of benefits in the GI tract. Other than being a nutrient, fiber just helps the flow through better and helps to reduce cholesterol absorption somewhat, and also helps move out materials that are made by the liver that are basically waste products that could be reabsorbed, but are not when you have more fiber in the diet. So there are benefits of fiber. And then regular lifestyle behaviors, especially activity, being with people, having good sleep, and lots of fluids, but not alcoholic fluids. They're okay, but not too much. Okay, now I just put a few references here. And this is the first one's for the book. The second one is one David and I did together, and he was a wonderful colleague, co-author on this paper. We did it together, but he did a lot of the work. He was a wonderful, wonderful person to work with. And then the last one is the one that you have in your handout. That's the Mediterranean Diet Guide. And I just wanted to look at that for a minute if it comes up next, okay? We'll just spend 1 minute. Oh, I wanted to mention that if you have a cognitive effect, to maintain your good cognitive effects, your benefits, your brain working right, the diet has been shown in a recent study, reported in the Berkeley newsletter. I have not seen the original article yet, that the Mediterranean diet is beneficial. And it's not the first study. There have been a number of them. So probably mental as well as physical benefits are occurring in the different organ systems. David's going to probably say more about this, so I'll move on that one. But just to mention that bone formation is benefited also by some of these polyphenols that come from various plants. Believe it or not, bone formation is benefited, particularly in younger people. But fat production is reduced. New fat cell production. So this is kind of an interesting twist. It has not been verified yet in human studies, only in animal models. But I hope that we'll have some data on that sometime soon. And this is the Mediterranean diet pyramid that you all have at your hands. Now, I had a listing of them before, but this slide didn't show up very well, and so you have a copy in front of you that you can look at. And you can see the benefits of all of these components, numbers, and heavy on the plant sources. So I'd like to stop with that And we'll have some time for questions later on, I believe. And David will come on next. That's for you. You need this. Sorry.
Yep, testing. All right.
Is that better?
Okay. So is that, there we go. All right. Okay, so what we're going to do now is make sure you understand what a polyphenol is and how to get more. It's really the biggest new trend in nutrition is the polyphenols. And what are they? It's all the color in fruits and vegetables, but it's also found even in grains and nuts and seeds. But all the purples and reds and greens, those colors are actually the polyphenolic compounds that are in the fruits and vegetables. Many of these colors are on the outside, like in an apple, they're primarily in the skin. And the reason they're there is to help protect the apple from radiation from the sun and also from various viruses trying to get into the plant material. So the polyphenols actually serve a purpose in plants, which is to protect the fruit. And many experts think that as we eat them, they provide protection. I'll show you the type of protection they provide for humans. Now, polyphenols is like the umbrella term, but the primary type of polyphenol is flavonoid. And there are over 8,000 of these. And these are the primary colors in fruits and vegetables and where most of the health comes from. What's interesting is that only about 100 of the polyphenols are in the foods that we typically eat. And flavonoids are about 40% of those. So let's look at the top 40 foods in the diet for polyphenols. And number one on the list, I know it's small, but I'll help you out here, is black elderberries. They have more polyphenols than any other food that is consumed by humans. Now, how many of you have ever consumed elderberries? Any of you? And in jam. And I think it's doubtful that the polyphenols survived that processing. So, how many of you have actually eaten them raw? It's a tough thing to do, isn't it? Yeah, you got to be a very faithful plant eater, vegetarian type to do that. So let's get to something that is more common, which is blueberries. Notice that they're fourth on the list. The other ones were chokeberry and black currant. Now, black currant is popular in New Zealand and the United Kingdom, but not so much here. And if you've ever tried to eat those are also tough to consume. So of all the top ones that are easy to consume and are likable is blueberries, is probably the easiest way to get a lot of polyphenols. And believe it or not, close behind it is coffee. Now, coffee has a different kind of polyphenol in it. And by the way, these are arranged in milligrams in a typical serving. So we're talking about something you would actually eat, the quantity that you would consume, and then what are the best ways of getting polyphenols. Now, what is the number one polyphenol in coffee? Do any of you know what it is? Chlorogenic acids. Have you heard about those? How many of you have heard of green coffee bean extract? It was all the rage recently, and there were a few cell studies and animal studies suggesting that it may increase metabolism and help you lose weight. However, there's hardly any human data, and the human data thus far have not backed up the animal studies. So there was a lot of hype about it. Dr. Oz pushed it. He has a tendency to push things before the research, and he acted like it was the best thing ever. And I know some people in the industry, they couldn't make it fast enough to keep up with the demand. If he says something, then everybody runs and gets it. And then the scientists slowly figure out whether it's true or not. And in this case, it was not true. It was not true. So then another one high on the list are sweet cherries. And the skins have a lot of polyphenols. And then also high on the list are strawberries. And then red raspberries. Notice I didn't put a picture, but plums are also there. And then green tea. Now green tea is a major source of polyphenols around the world. And green tea and coffee are actually the primary sources of polyphenols if you look at the total world consumption. Then apples are a good source. And then red wine and grapes. And if it's red wine, it has quite a bit of polyphenols in it. However, if you look here, we also have, and I didn't put a picture of it, we have dark chocolate right here in the list. I didn't put a picture there because the chocolate comes with what? A lot of fat and sugar, so I don't think it's a healthy way to get it. And wine is a good source, but you got to be careful, right? So you could eat a couple apples in a day and maybe 1 or 2 drinks of wine in a given day, but for women, it's recommended no more than 1 serving a day, and for men, no more than 2 servings a day. So then, spinach is one of the better vegetables. Notice that most of these are fruits and beverages, and then broccoli. So these are the top 40 foods for polyphenols. Yes? So we actually just finished a major study in our lab looking at coffee. If the coffee is lightly roasted, that's the first thing you got to look for is light roast. If it's dark roast, many of the polyphenols have been destroyed. So it needs to be a light roast. And the highest of all is green coffee bean extract because there's no roasting. So then the next best is light roast. Then the next thing you got to have is a highly finely ground coffee. And it can't be coarsely ground. It has to be almost into a powder form. And then the next factor is the method of preparation. And guess what is the best? And we did a whole bunch of research on this. What do you think is the best preparation of all for coffee polyphenols getting in your body? Which one? That's not bad, but it's not the best. Turkish. Who said Turkish? Have you tried it? So why don't you tell everybody how you do it? That's right. Yeah. Yeah, so as you boil it, it starts to foam and then you let it down, then boil. Every time you do that, you're releasing more and more polyphenols into the water, and then the net result is you get a very, very high level. Now, we worked with a company, some of you may know the man who owns the company, Dr. Bob Arnott. He used to be the medical correspondent for NBC. And then he stood up against the Iraqi war, and they fired him because he was too adamant about not going to the war. So he is a very interesting guy. He's come to our campus several times, and he owns a company where he has a lightly roasted, highly ground coffee for Turkish. It's called Dr. Danger Hardcore. If you look it up, just write it down, Doctor. I have no conflict of interest here. I'm just telling you, he's helped us with the research and paid for it. Dr. Danger Hardcore, 405. And that's the best coffee of all. It comes from Turkey. And why do you think the best coffee beans come from Turkey?
Yeah.
What do you think? Anybody been to Turkey here? Yeah, and you go to the high elevations of Turkey in that climate, and the coffee beans just have a huge amount of polyphenols. As they, caffeine is super high. When you drink 1 cup of Dr. Danger Hardcore 405, you get 425 milligrams of caffeine per cup. Oh, I see what you're saying. So if there's no caffeine in it, no, the polyphenols are still there. We actually studied that with Bob Arnott. So taking the caffeine out does not affect that. Yeah. Roasting, though, does. So if it's a dark roasted, decaffeinated coffee, you're getting very few polyphenols because of dark roasting.
It's a typical serving of coffee, 1 cup.
Yes, yeah, 1 cup.
4 or 5
So in our study, we defined a serving as 300 mLs. So 300 mLs, and then when you do all the, like the Turkish, it'll get down more like to 200 to 250 after everything boils and that sort of thing. So you start with 300, and then probably what you're actually drinking is about 220 when it's all said and done. Okay, now, so when you get to polyphenols and flavonoids, there's 6 different groups. So let's just make sure you understand it. So the first group is called flavan3-ols. That's the green tea group. There's also some in chocolate, in wine, and grapes, but green tea is the major source. The second group are the flavanones. That's citrus flavonoid. And then there's the flavone, a very strange group. Parsley and celery seed, hardly eat that at all. Isoflavones, which John has studied, is in soybeans. Flavanols are onions, apples, tea. The main one is quercetin. We'll talk about that in a second. And then anthocyanins are the berries and many stone fruits. So a stone fruit is what? Peaches, plums, stuff like that. And then you get to a separate group of complex flavonoids that have the proanthocyanins, and that's like in cranberries and grapes, but it's also in chocolate and stone fruits, and there's many foods that have those. So those are the main flavonoid groups. Now what we tell people as a general rule of thumb, it's good to try to have 2 or 3 groups every day. The more you mix the flavonoids, the better. So give me how you would mix at least 2 classes. What would you have for breakfast and what would you have for lunch? Smoothie, okay. I guess that would be one way, yeah. So blueberries for breakfast and coffee? Yeah? And is coffee on this list? No, so it is not a flavonoid. Coffee is a polyphenol, the chlorogenic acid, but it's not a flavonoid. These are the primary bioactive polyphenols. These are the main ones that scientists are interested in. So blueberries for breakfast, and then for lunch, pardon? Are you ready to wine for dinner? Is that what you? Okay. Yeah, so you get wine for dinner. Now let's just talk about quercetin, which is one of the star flavonoids. I've spent 8 years studying this flavonoid. The military is very interested in it. Now, 1 apple will have about 8 to 10 milligrams, but the number 1 source of quercetin, elderberries again, and then onions and peppers and cranberries. And the military is very interested in quercetin because it has more of it gets through the human intestine than any other flavonoid, and it has more effects in the human body than any other flavonoid studied. So quercetin is a real important one to get. And so if you like berries and onions, apples, apples actually are the number 1 source in the average American diet because Americans are willing to eat apples. Now, it takes 3.5 to 11 hours for the half-life. Half of it is cleared, so it can take up to a day for the quercetin to get out of your body. Most flavonoids are like that. You eat something in the morning, and it slowly gets metabolized, and it's starting to come out the next day. And it starts accumulating in your tissues, which is a good thing, which we'll talk about here. So what does the average American take in? 251 milligrams a day. But 80% of that comes from tea. And 29% of Americans drink tea. That's it, 29%. How many of you drink tea? How many drink green tea? Okay, so it'd be pretty close to the same percentage there. And if you take away the tea, the average American only takes in 50 milligrams of polyphenols or flavonoids a day. The average American only takes in 2 servings of fruits and vegetables a day. That's pitiful. What should it be? 5 up to 9 if you're a big guy. So you're a big guy, you need 9 servings a day.
Oh boy.
Well, I mean, you like fruits and vegetables, right?
Absolutely.
Now here, maybe we can change your mind on this. Because here's what happens if you eat a lot of polyphenols. Mortality goes down. I'll show you a graph. Neurodegenerative diseases go down. What is the number 1 neurodegenerative disease? Alzheimer's. Alzheimer rates go down. Long-term studies show that people that have a lot of flavonoids in their diet have less weight gain. You remember what John said about adipocytes, fat cells? What did you say about that? You did research on that.
Yes, the fat cells are depressed in the marrow in making of it. So that's the benefit of some of the isoflavones and other molecules.
Is that convincing you yet? Here's another one. Systemic inflammation, oxidative stress go down, diabetes risk goes down. And these are all high-level recent studies showing all of this. Heart disease goes down, high blood pressure goes down, and the common cold goes down. And we did a study here on this campus with 1,000 people, and people who had 3 servings of fruit a day had a significant reduction in the number of days they were sick with a common cold during the winter and fall. To me, that's reason enough, is to eat 3 servings of fruits a day. So let's just take a look at this. So Americans were, this is actually a study of older women in America, divided into low consumers, moderate and high consumers, and then they were studied for 5 years. And do you see the top dotted line right here? This one right here? That was the high consumer, and their mortality rate was 60% lower. I mean, that's a huge effect. I mean, you've looked at graphs like this before. This is a huge difference in our world of research. So then, I want to show you what happens to the polyphenols when you eat them. And you're not going to believe this story. It has only recently been understood and measured, including on this campus where we have some of the world's leading experts on this whole thing. So here's what happens. Let's say you have some blueberries and some grapes for breakfast. Believe it or not, the colors in those, the flavonoids, almost all of it goes to your colon. It just whizzes right through the small intestine and hardly anything gets absorbed. Then the next thing, so here's an anthocyanin that came from the blueberry right there. There it is, right there. That's what that's from the blueberry. Then the bacteria love to eat that. So they start chomping this up. They start biting it up, and they turn it into little pieces. We call it small phenolics. And then, believe it or not, these things can get absorbed through the wall of the colon. They just start oozing out, and it's picked up in the portal vein. And where does the portal vein go to? To the liver. But we did research on this campus showing that if you eat some blueberries and go for a brisk walk, more of them get through. Now, why do you think that more of these pieces would get through if you exercise? And we're talking a real brisk walk, so you start to get, a little sweat. Not an easy walk, a hard walk. Why would more of the pieces get through, do you think? Heart rate? No, not the heart rate. Say again? No, but that's a good one. Well, absorption is affected, but why would the pieces get through the colon wall better if you walk briskly?
Because your temperature rises?
That's it. Are you a Ph.D. person? No. That's exactly it. So she said that as your body temperature goes up during the walk, it warms up your colon. And there's little junctions that open up and these things get through. So we call it getting a bigger bang for your blueberry. Eat your blueberries, go on a brisk walk so you get nice and warm, a little sweat, not an easy one. You can't go to a store and walk around. That doesn't count. We're talking a power walk. Then you'll open it up and more pieces get through. Then you say, well, why is that important? Well, it goes up to the liver, and this is where John has done some very interesting research. In the liver, the pieces are conjugated by the cells. They're very busy, those cells. This is your chemical biochemistry factory. And they connect it in what is called phase 2 conjugation to glycine and other things, and then come out as hippuric acid and many other. We have an expert here that says about 200 different chemicals come out. And guess what? Those start floating around your body for about a day, and almost all the benefits come there. John has showed that hippuric acid helps your bones. Is it the density of the bones?
Increase cells production of new bone.
Oh, so new bone production is increased by hippuric acid, and then all those other things that came from the bacteria chomping on your anthocyanins. That's where all the benefits come, but it only lasts a day, and then it's eliminated where? In the urine. And then you better eat blueberries again the next day, and apples and grapes, and keep it going. Because if you do it once, it's a short-term effect. So here's what happens if you do it on a regular basis. Here is a very famous study in Europe, and they studied people for 12 years. And they divided people into people who had a lot of those phenolics that came from the liver and the colon in the blood, that's this group, versus people who didn't have much. Now see, right now, some of you in this room, if we collected your urine, which we just did in a study, we did all this. We just did all this. In fact, some of you might have been in our 12-week study where we had people have a flavonoid supplement or placebo. Was anybody in this room in that study? We had these chewable tablets. You chewed the flavonoid tablets. Is anybody here in that study? So we just did a 12-week study and measured this. And we got people into this group in 12 weeks by eating 329 milligrams of flavonoids a day in a supplement. We'd rather you do it with fresh fruits and vegetables, but we were able to get people into this group by essentially giving them about 1.5 cups of blueberry equivalent a day in a supplement. And if you're in that group, you have a 30% lower mortality. So right now, do you have a lot of phenolics in your urine because you have a lot of fruits and vegetables or not? That will determine how soon you die. So are you yet convinced? Are you going to start eating more blueberries?
Absolutely.
How come he doesn't sound convinced, you know? So here's the conclusion. Yes.
How about frozen blueberries? Freezing the blueberries?
Yes.
Do you lose anything?
No, and Marianne Lila is probably the #1 blueberry expert in the world, and she has verified that freezing it is just fine. And then she says to lightly microwave it or just let it at room temperature, and then you hardly lose anything at all. Yeah. Yes.
Did you work out ahead of eating the blueberries and have them in a smoothie? Is the effect the same?
And so that's a great question. So he's saying, so we, in our study, we had people increase their blueberry intake for 2 weeks to get this whole thing revved up. And then we put them in the lab and exercised them, got their colon hot, and showed that more got through. So the key is just to have that going on a regular basis, and then you have more of the polyphenols all the time in your colon, and then every day you exercise, more gets out. So the key is to have a lot in the colon, and then exercise, pieces get to the liver, gets in the blood, gets in the urine. You want more in your urine, you want more in your stool, you want more in your colon, you want it everywhere, and that just takes doing it every day. Yes, Mark.
The other thing that Mary Ann has said about frozen blueberries is when you get them, you can actually get wild blueberries frozen at Costco these days. She said, be careful not to defrost and refreeze. It's best to keep them in a frozen state.
Yep. Yes. Okay, yes.
A lot of this digestion probably on the quality of the bacteria in the colon.
Yeah, so I don't know if you all heard that. That's a great question. She's saying, well, what if the bacteria in your colon are a certain type that's different from somebody else? And we're studying that right now. And there is a huge variance in the way people handle these polyphenols that come from the diet. Some people have bacteria that rip them up into a lot of pieces, and a lot of it gets in the blood and the urine. Some people don't do it as well. However, there's increasing research that the longer you keep eating a lot of polyphenols, the more you transform the bacteria in the colon in the right way so that they will be the ones that you want. So the habitual diet will help. However, everybody is different. And there are some people that eat a lot of berries and still don't produce as many of these as other people. So there's variance, and we're trying to understand why. Why is there that variance? Yes?
Could it have to do with what they're eating things with? Like, for instance, fruits digest quickly and other foods don't, like meats maybe go through slowly, or things that have more fiber in them might go through slower. Does that have an effect on how much you absorb?
Well, so remember quercetin, that one flavonoid? There's research out of Germany that if you have some fat in the diet, so let's say that you had some olive oil and then had a dessert with blueberries, and then the quercetin in the blueberry would actually be absorbed better with the olive oil in that meal.
Is that
So
the cell wall being fatty? What do you think?
I don't know the reason, but that study showed that the blood level was significantly higher if you had some beneficial fat with the meal. So I think, people have all different kinds of diets, and if they think you can use blueberries as a vitamin pill and have a junk food diet and everything else, I think that's another problem. Is it has to be really what John was saying, the Mediterranean diet is a plant food-based diet with only some seafood, and red meat is more like a condiment, right?
That's right, that's right. But some dairy food also, including yogurt.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Is it affected by lightly cooking, like say broccoli, or should it all be raw?
So Marianne Lila has looked in that, and the longer you cook, the more you lose. Another real important thing is some people, let's say you take green tea, and there's companies that take that and put it into a bottle and sell it. She and other research groups have shown that there's hardly any polyphenols left in that bottled green tea because many of these companies don't have the right pH in the bottle. And the flavonoids destabilize if the pH isn't acidic. And so that's a problem. However, there's a new study out showing that if you have 100% pure juice, and you can buy these now, the 100% pure juice, like 100% orange juice, and it didn't come from concentrate, it's 100% juice. The studies show that the polyphenols survive very well in 100% fruit juice. So, yes, it could because it's acidic, yes.
I'm getting a Lipton green tea bag versus loose leaf.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, yes.
Using blueberries, would organic versus ones that have all the spray on them?
Yeah, so you want me to say it straight? Yeah, study after study has shown that there is no advantage in the organic versus what you would get in the store for polyphenol content in blueberries. Now, what Marianne Lila has shown, that if you go to Alaska, they have the low blueberry bush that grows up there, and those poor blueberries are exposed to great environmental stress. And the high environmental stress produces a lot of anthocyanins in those blueberries. So the blueberries differ. If you get a blueberry that has had a lot of environmental stress, it'll have more polyphenols than a blueberry that hasn't. So that factor affects things, but not whether it's organic or not. Now, I have 60 blueberry bushes up in the mountains. I have a little farm up there and I grow them. And I do organic growing for the health of the soil. My soil is so happy. I put a lot of mulch and there's worms and bacteria all over it. And it's nice and dark, and I do it for that reason. And most experts say it's more for the health of the soil than that the blueberry or whatever is going to have more of the polyphenols or other nutrients. This has been shown over and over, and unfortunately, many of the companies that sell organic push that story too far, and now there are limits on what they can say, and the best reviews are indicating there's very little, if any, difference. So I wouldn't pay the extra for organic. It is not worth it. Yeah. So you told me to say it straight, right? Okay. Yeah. Well, so again, you want it straight again? So there's this excellent review that looked at this, and it was a group of experts from around the world got together and wrote a consensus paper. And here was their conclusion. The pesticide residue on food sold in the United States is too low to have a measurable impact on human health. There are some countries where we don't have the safeguards and the EPA to protect, and then there's more of a concern. But in the United States, the pesticide residue is too small to have a measurable impact on human health.
Still wash fruits and vegetables.
Yes. Oh, yeah, because there are bacteria that can contaminate fruits and vegetables. And what is the number one bacteria-contaminated fruit? Do you know what it is? The number one fruit well, that's high on the list. There's one that's higher than any, that if there is polluted water that's sprayed on it or whatever, the bacteria will get in it. Strawberries. It's strawberries. So that's why you want to wash everything. But the pesticide residue is not the issue. Okay, so our conclusion is the high consumption of unprocessed plant foods by inhabitants of countries bordering the Mediterranean Sea has been linked to multiple health and disease prevention benefits that are in large part due to what? All the color in the diet. Just do everything you can, every meal, to add color in your meal. And then you'll be okay. You won't even have to count the milligrams. They'll be there. Okay, other questions? Yes. Yes.
Yes, good.
Anyone in here is 18 or younger with all this so do you have any words from a nutrition standpoint about what we should or should not be doing with our diet? Because it seems like we get really conflicting messages about, anything that we can or cannot do dietary-wise to help our bones.
Thank you very much for that question. Calcium's overhyped. There's no question about that. We need calcium, but we don't need super amounts. The recommended dietary allowances for adult women are 800. If you go over 50, it's 1,000. But that's probably an over amount. Probably the requirement's around 600 milligrams of calcium a day. So vitamin D is needed, but we don't know enough about the vitamin D in bone yet, unless you're really low. So just keeping it in a moderate intake level is probably sufficient. But it's all the other nutrients that are important, including these polyphenols. So we don't know everything about it by any means, but calcium is certainly important, but not so important. The same with vitamin D. We're still learning about vitamin D. It may be important for other things more than for bone. We're not sure. But definitely it helps absorb calcium if we don't have a lot in the diet. And this is a misnomer that a lot of people don't understand. If you have an adequate amount of calcium, vitamin D does almost nothing for calcium absorption. It's only when you're low. Vitamin D then kicks in as a very significant adaptive hormone. But under normal conditions, an adequate amount of calcium, say 800 milligrams a day, your vitamin D level doesn't have to be super high. What it does is probably affects other cells in the body, but we don't fully understand it. This is a big mystery.
Now, you know that people that do exercise, especially where the weight of your whole body is on your feet and you do a little jumping, that strengthens the bone big time. So what teenage girls, and I have one, just turned 16, just got her driver's license. I feel like I'm free. But she's a cheerleader, and her bones are really great because they jump all over the place. I mean, for 2 to 3 hours, they're jumping up and down, and that's what it takes, a growing girl, along with a lot of calcium intake, jumping around. Then that critical time period, you get a lot of calcium in the bone bank, right? You want a lot of calcium in that bone bank. Yeah, if you're active and eating the calcium, then your bones have the bank, and then slowly but surely, from your mid-20s on, you're losing it.
You're losing after about age 30 or so, and for women after the menopause, there's a rapid loss rate. But activity helps at any stage of life. Physical activity is definitely beneficial, no question about that. It's the one thing that really we know helps, being active. I don't mean super active, but keeping your muscles and bones working together.
Yeah. All right, are we done? Anything else? Yes.
Is there a minimum amount of olive oil that we should have every day to function properly?
I'm not really sure about the total amount of olive oil, but it's probably a good idea to have some in a salad or whatever it's every day.
So you think 1 or 2 tablespoons?
Probably relatively small amounts each day. You could eat olives too. They help.
Yes.
Can you speak about soy and whether it is a thyroid disruptor?
Here's Mr. Sawyer right here.
No, I'm not necessarily. It may have some things that interfere with diet and metabolism, but I don't know much about it. That's really more of a clinical issue. I'm sorry. I'm not qualified to answer that.
Okay, are we good? All right, thank you very much.